Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce, the Ukraine War news update for the 26th of July 2023. I'll split this into two videos as per normal because this first one usually gets restricted, although I might have a little play around with that today. There's a lot of stuff to go through, a lot going on the front line. Let's just go to where we normally start. The usual place of the general staff figures for Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, or the usual caveats apply. Slightly fewer numbers in terms of liquidated personnel. Those are Russian casualties or deaths, depending on how you interpret these. 460 is a couple of hundred fewer people than we have seen over the last few days, but still around the 500 mark, I guess. 3 tanks and 5 APVs is certainly less than yesterday and the day before. So I don't know what that shows. Whether there was slightly less going on the front lines yesterday, definitely not the case. I don't think. I think there's a big uptick in activity right up and down the front line. So 22 artillery systems is still a significant number, so they're definitely still aiming for those. 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems. I've seen a couple. I've got a couple of bits of video of Strelas being taken out. Short range air defense systems. 1 helicopter Ka-52 that we've seen. In fact, there's now footage of that falling from the sky, so that's definitely happened. 16 drones. That won't be from last night, the night before. 17 vehicles and fuel tanks. 5 pieces of special equipment. That's always an important one to see as a category. Special equipment is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, electronic warfare, all that kind of stuff, and other things. It's quite a wide-ranging category. So yeah, less in these first 3 categories, but as you would expect in the other ones. Yeah, interesting because there is a definite uptick in activities around Bakhmut. I think those figures are going to shoot up today because there's a lot happening in Zaporizhia right now. So we shall see. Right, overview of Ukrainian equipment losses from yesterday. This is according to Oryx, visually confirmed. 10 pieces of kit lost for the Ukrainians. For the Russians, 40 pieces of kit lost. So now we're going back to seeing a really big disparity between the two, and the ratio much more in favor of Ukraine, where we have seen parity for the last couple of days. In fact, Andrew Perpetua has done his own kind of like videos that he's seen. It won't be as far wide ranging as Oryx, but he just counted up everything he saw yesterday, and it was, I think, 21-11 Russian to Ukrainian pieces of kit. So again, he kind of bears out. I know it's a little bit anecdotal, but it gives you an idea that yeah, the Russians are losing a lot of equipment compared to the Ukrainians. And as you can see, there's quite a spread of equipment for the Russians too. We can see infantry, fighting vehicles, tanks, artillery, air defense systems, and radar. Telar there. What is a Telar? It is a transporter, erector, launcher, and radar. It's a vehicle that incorporates part or all of the radar system necessary for firing the surface-to-air missiles. So that is what that is, and other bits and pieces. And an alligator attack helicopter that is talked about here. So, according to Russian blogger Kirill Fyodorov, the Ka-52 downed by Eastern Ukraine earlier today, so it's yesterday, was hit with 3 missiles fired from British delivered Stormer HVM short range air defense systems. So these are basically air defense, almost like man pads, give or take, put on top of a tracked chassis, and you have a number of missile pods, and not too dissimilar from the Strela and type air defense. Anyway, this chap says his channel was involved in organising support for one of the crew members. Both of them perished. So yeah, when you look at the footage for this, I won't show it because I've just shown it. Dang. But basically, yeah, that helicopter falls out the sky, and that is the end of that helicopter. So definitely that Ka-52 was hit. Here we have a Telar, another Telar being, or probably the one that you've just seen actually, for the book. So that's the transport, remember, transport, erector, launcher, and radar. So that's an air defense system getting hit. Then we have another air defense system here, Strela being hit, and then another Strela being hit by Bakhmut, a short range air defense system. First of all, that Strela fires at a fixed wing drone. There's another drone here spotting for artillery that then takes out the Strela. So that is the Russians are losing quite a lot of kit. Ukraine is obviously losing stuff as well. I saw some footage just now of in the Zaporizhia region, certainly at least maybe two Bradleys in a tank, or it might be three Bradleys with the latest kind of Brat armor on that were abandoned in Zaporizhia somewhere. So there is a lot of activity going on in Zaporizhia. It doesn't mean that that won't be recovered and then repaired or used or whatever. They didn't look like it was damaged. It depends whether the Russian drones get to them. Another senior officer in Russia has been denazified. Colonel Yevgeny Vashunin was killed just north of Bakhmut. Now, I did report that, but just to let you know, I think I reported that one yesterday, that yeah, these things are sort of being confirmed. Lengthy posts from mill blogger Bulba of Thrones discussing the genocide of Russian artillery. TLDR is too long didn't read is Ukrainian losses pale in insignificance to Russian, and while Bradleys can be replaced, howitzers, multiple launch rocket systems, and other Russian artillery cannot. Crackdown on dissenters such as Gherkin bloggers and military figures is seen as preparation for bad news in the autumn. Another goodwill gesture predicted soon. So this is really kind of doom mongering for the Russians here by Russians, talking about the genocide of artillery and how they are just losing huge amounts. And then this feeds back into these kind of figures. So are these realistic? Well, the Russians are saying they are. And actually talks a lot about OSINT and people like Oryx basically saying, I think it's in this one, saying that they give out the stats are orders of magnitude like 10 times higher for the Russians than they are from the Ukrainians, and talks about how even though they might have their biases, they're not lying because they still report the Ukrainian ones as well, and basically asking, well, can we replace the losses of these? Our production isn't as high as the Ukrainian allied production, so on and so forth. It's a really big sort of criticism of the situation for the Russians. Talking, I mean, I'm going to read through the whole of this in the extra video later. In order to continue to destroy the advancing infantry fighting vehicles, BMPs, and tanks of the armed forces of Ukraine, the Russian Federation needs defensive positions. When the Russian Federation runs out self-propelled guns and howitzers, defensive positions will begin to be demolished with artillery. This is exactly what we've been talking about for a long time. In addition, the practical range of Krasnopol is 17 kilometers, Excalibur 35 kilometers. This is really important. So the asymmetry is definitely there. Not only does Ukraine have access to far more precision-guided munitions, such as the Excalibur shell for their howitzers, but the Russian equivalent, the Krasnopol, has half the range. So, and they don't really have many of those, from what we can gather. It's a really really big, realistic critique of the Russian situation at the moment. But and actually, there's another one really similar to that I've been reading as well. I think I might have that appearing later. A Ukrainian soldier was killed and several others wounded, including Deutsche Welle. So that's the DW, the German media organization. A cameraman was injured during a cluster bomb attack at Druzhkivka, which is near sort of Konstantinivka, that kind of on the way to Kramatorsk, Sloviansk. So the idea that Russians can hold the moral high ground over the Ukrainians for cluster munitions, well, they've been using them since the beginning of the war, and they continue to use them. So, yeah. This is just I don't know what's going on here. This is another Russia on fire instance, but goodness knows. I mean, I've never seen anything like this happen in the UK. Just I've never seen it. Nothing like this generally happens. So why is stuff like this happening all the time in Russia? Has Russia just got really bad health and safety, or is there a lot of stuff that's connected to the war? Could this be, for example, a Russian commercial truck that's actually carrying loads of military equipment that we know is happening inside Russia. I don't know, but anyway, that's a fundamentally big explosion of a commercial truck in Russia. Anyway, moving on to strikes, and quite a quiet night, all things considered. Um, there weren't any cruise missiles or drone strikes, as far as I can work out. But as far as strikes are concerned, Thomas Tyner says 125 plus Storm Shadows have been fired at Russian targets. Only one couldn't ID its target and therefore aborted its mission and crashed. So when Ben Wallace, the UK Defence Secretary, he's sort of working his the end of his tenure there. He said recently that they've almost entirely been successful, and he might have just been indicating this one that didn't find its target. It couldn't ID its target. So what Storm Shadows have, which are really good, shows a bit of, I don't know, morality within these missile systems, is that if it can't ID the target, rather than just go and blow something up nearby, there's a safe spot it's programmed to go and find and explode over there. And so probably going to be a nearby field or something. Now, there was a storm shadow found in a field, or the Russians claim that they're taking it down by air defenses, but it could well be that actually this is what happened. It couldn't ID its target, went off somewhere else, and then crashed there. So what Thomas Steiner goes on to say is that another of Putin's proposed red lines has been shown to be nonsense. Russian red lines only exist in Western politicians' minds. Send ATACMS. I'd fully agree, although I have talked about how I think ATACMS not being sent is a military strategic decision rather than a bloody-minded decision. But my opinion is kind of send them anyway type thing. But I just thought it was interesting because 125 plus that's like double what we thought recently. So point being, I think there's been an increase in the use of Storm Shadows, probably as you've had more airframes adapted to be able to use them. So whereas I think initially there were only two airframes that could use Storm Shadows, you almost certainly got more now, and they're using them more liberally. For example, Crimea is being hammered on a daily basis. Reports of an explosion in the Yevpatoria, occupied Crimea right now. That was, I think, an ammunition dump there. And also here at Krasnoperekopsk, and indeed that is going on right now, right there in both Sevastopol and Krasnoperekopsk in Crimea. Explosions are heard. Helicopters and airplanes are reportedly flying around, probably to get them off the ground so they can't get hit. While the Sevastopol Bay would also be closed for traffic. So Ukrainians are consistently hammering those logistics lines. That continues. There have no doubt been explosions in Tokmak and other places. I don't know for sure, but Tokmak has been hit every night, as far as I can work out, by HIMARS, because that's in HIMARS range, and other places up and down the front line. So that will be continuing. Right, let's move on to other bits and pieces. Here we have, right, this is massive. Just trying to unpick the geopolitical calculations that are going on here. So a Russian fighter jet severely damaged a US Air Force MQ-9 Reaper drone that was conducting counter-ISIS operations over Syria. This has happened before, but this really is a problem, right? So there's footage, and well, let's read out to you what actually happened. This is what the US Air Force has said. So on the 23rd of July, a Russian fighter aircraft flew dangerously close to a US MQ-9 drone on a defeat ISIS mission, harassing the MQ-9 and deploying flares from a position directly overhead, with only a few meters of separation between the aircraft. One of the Russian flares struck the US MQ-9, severely damaging its propeller. Fortunately, the crew was able to maintain flight and safely recover the aircraft to its home base. The Russian fighter's blatant disregard for flight safety detracts from our mission to ensure the enduring defeat of ISIS. We call upon the Russian forces in Syria to put an immediate end to this reckless, unprovoked, and unprofessional behavior. Right. As far as I'm concerned, this is arguably equivalent to the outbreak of war between Russia and the US. Right. If that had been a US airplane with a human being inside, that would be war, right? you've attacked. You basically because what they're trying to do is break the thing so it falls out the sky or can't do its job. But essentially, you're trying to stop this thing without effectively shooting it. You are trying to ruin it or ruin its job. Now, either one of those is deeply problematic. Now, is it that Russia can do anything to the US as long as it doesn't involve a live human being? So, could they blow up a radar station that was just unmanned? If they shot a missile at a radar station, is that all right? Because the US is in a really difficult situation here because they obviously don't want to say, right, we're now at war with Russia, because that's World War Three. So this red line is really blurry. So and Russia can take advantage of that. Like I'm not criticizing the US here. Actually, the opposite. I'm obviously criticizing Russia. I'm actually completely sympathetic with how difficult a situation the US are in. Like, it appears that Russia can start pushing the envelope and ruining US equipment because they know that the US aren't going to declare war with Russia. So that Russia can go around and effectively try and destroy US air capabilities, these unmanned Reaper drones, really expensive bits of kit, really high value quality, technological pieces of kit. Russians can try and ruin them and get away with it. It's like, yeah, they're not going to start war, and what should we do next? What should we do next? I don't know. I'd be interested to see what you guys think, but I think this is despicable from Russia. uh, but at the same time, I I wouldn't know how to react. I literally, you know, this. I mean, this should be. Well, I guess at the very least there should be massive diplomatic fallout. I'd be kicking. I'd be kicking diplomats out of the US. Maybe I would certainly be turning the screw on sanctions and stuff even further if that's at all possible. There has to be robust reaction to that. But yeah, difficult. Right, a completely different bit of news here. And Michael Weiss did say the day before, yeah, there's going to be an interesting news piece dropping tomorrow about Prigozhin. You may not want to read it, type thing. So this is for the insider. Prigozhin apparently, I don't know whether to say this, likes 18-year-old virgins because he thinks their bodily fluids preserve his vitality. He's also has metallic balls implanted under anyway, around his genitals. Interview with a woman who sold her virginity to him. That's in the Outsider. You can go and read that. I'm probably not going to dwell on that. However, you could. Is this just a hatchet job on Prigozhin? Probably that too. But is it true? Probably. Uh, yeah. So that is an interesting read to say the least. So Prigozhin, and of course, when you look at the rules on gender assignment that they just brought out in Russia, when you've got Putin trying to show himself to be this really orthodox Christian, like trying to get in bed with traditionalist views and the Russian Orthodox Church and all this, and then you got Prigozhin doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, Russia has planted additional naval mines on approaches to Ukrainian ports in order to blow up civilian ships and blame Ukraine later. That's stated by the US Charge d'Affaires and to the OSCE, Catherine Brooker, during a special meeting to the OSCE Permanent Council on Russian Missile Terror. So Russia are doing, in fact, they had their patrol boat where two naval mines attacked it. Yes, I don't know what the outcome of that was, but that there are accusations that Russia are effectively putting a trade blockade on vessels in the Black Sea going towards, the Danube, going towards grain ports like Odessa. So it's a real, yeah, really, really, really big hot mess. That UK Defence Ministry has said that Russian Navy changes its posture to blockade Ukrainian ports. Oh, look. Here it is. Following the collapse of the grain deal, the Russian Sea Fleet has Black Sea Fleet, sorry, has altered its posture to enforce a blockade on Ukraine's ports. The UK Defence Ministry has said the Russian corvette Sergei Kotov has been deployed to patrol the shipping lane between the Bosphorus and Odessa. The ministry reported that there is a realistic possibility that it will join a force that will intercept any commercial cargo ships sailing to Ukrainian ports. There you go. And this is what I was talking about, sort of with reference to the previous mill blogger who was saying, "Woe is us, Russia." With Gherkin gone, his mate Merz from the 4th LPR Brigade is taking the turn in doom posting. He says Ukrainians are successfully realizing their plans of strong pushes in any area of the front line that is available, destroying Russian artillery. Actually, I wonder if this is the same guy. No, I don't think it is. No, it's not. I was worrying that I might just be repeating myself, but it's not. It's a different guy. He says, in any area of the front line that is available, destroying Russian artillery and taking out trained forces. He says if this goes on in the late summer and fall, can be very difficult for Russia when it starts running out of personnel. And then the Russian authorities who are delaying the next mobilization will be forced to throw new Mobics into battle from trains in World War II style, just to try and stop the continued Ukrainian offensive. And in fact, I'll be talking about more on this in the military aid section in my second video, because they are changing all the rules to be able to try and get as many mobilized as possible. This just says about Klishchivka and the situation in general. As far as I know, the fighting in Klishchivka area continues. The enemy is trying, not without success, to cling onto the village. In general, I would like to pass major greetings to all those blah, 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 blah. The enemy consistently and quite skillfully realizes the numerical advantage he has created in all directions that are more or less convenient for him to attack. The enemy is actively rushing forward, forcing our troops to transfer reserves there. This forward movement of the enemy is facilitated by the persistent total advantage of the enemy, both in the quantity and quality of drones and in the field of electronic warfare. As I've already wrote, the enemy is counter-battery combat, does not spare the HIMARS for our individual guns, realizing that a successful defense relies on artillery. So, in other words, yep, HIMARS really are taking out our individual pieces of kit. While Moscow admits that the first wave of mobilization was incompetently screwed up, the troops need a lot of replenishment, and Moscow will decide to continue mobilization. But before it begins, before the mobilized are all gathered, before at least they are taught something, I think the whole of August and the whole of September will be very difficult. And if the enemy manages to break through the front, then catastrophic. So there's lots of talk. I was listening to Ukraine, the latest podcast from yesterday, saying Mr. Bretton Gordon talking about how, again, as we've been, talking about in our threads, and I've been saying in my videos, that once that initial first line is broken, and there's an argument that could happen, they're pushing for that today in Robotna and areas. So if that's broken, then behind you really could see not a lot. It could be an overwhelming of the Russian defenses, and he was saying he's still confident that that is the case. Now, on the other hand, the Russians are pushing up in Luhansk and having some great success up there. So, the swings and roundabouts, I guess. There aren't really any other options for slowing, retreating, destroying as many Ukrainians as possible, preserving your people as much as possible, and preventing the enemy from breaking through the front. So both the lists of settlements taken by the enemy in Zaporizhia and Bakhmut direction will most likely be replenished more than once with new positions and settlements. We need to make sure that this replenishment is made as expensively as possible and happens as late as possible. In other words, yeah, all the usual stuff, but the Ukrainians, because this is from a Russian point of view, Ukrainians will take more towns and settlements, and it will be expensive. We've got to make sure it's as expensive for the Ukrainians as possible, and as slow as possible for them to expand their territorial control. Anyway, so on and so forth. A couple of these posts that are coming out are really worth reading. I mean, they are in the style of Gherkin, by the point of fact that they are highly critical of the Russian situation, even though they are vehemently pro-Russian, and that is worth paying attention to. I am feeling quite buoyed today in the success that the Ukrainians are showing, and on the cusp of having in the south, perhaps. Although, on the other hand, up in the north, the Russians have made some gains too. So, Anyway, that's the end of this first video. I will do the second video, starting with the front line shortly. Please pop into that video as well. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care. Speak soon.